The rain was coming down like bullets that Tuesday evening, and Lisa Chen could barely see through her windshield wipers as they fought against the storm. She was exhausted beyond belief. 14 hours of work would do that to anyone. Her shift at the hospital had ended at 3, but she'd promised Mike at the diner she'd cover the evening rush since his other waitress called in sick again. Lisa's hands ached from carrying heavy trays all day, and her feet felt like they were on fire even through her comfortable work shoes. All she wanted was to get home to her 8-year-old daughter Sophie, help her with homework, and maybe catch a few minutes of that cooking show they both loved before bedtime. The highway stretched ahead of her like a dark river, with only the occasional headlight cutting through the downpour. Most sensible people were probably home by now, safe and dry. But Lisa wasn't most people. She was a single mom doing whatever it took to keep the lights on and food on the table. That's when she saw him. At first, it was just a shadow on the side of the road, but as she got closer, Lisa could make out the shape of a man standing next to what looked like an expensive car. A really expensive car. Even in the rain and darkness, she could tell it was one of those fancy German cars that cost more than she made in 2 years. Her first instinct was to keep driving. It was late, she was tired, and stopping to help strangers on dark highways wasn't exactly the safest thing a woman could do. Plus, whoever owned that car probably had roadside assistance and a cell phone that worked better than her old flip phone. But something made her slow down. Maybe it was the way the man was just standing there, not even trying to flag down passing cars. He looked defeated, like he'd given up hope. The rain was soaking through his clothes, and he seemed completely out of his element. Lisa had seen that look before, the helpless expression of someone who had no idea what to do next. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head, as clear as if the old woman was sitting right there in the passenger seat. "Mija, you help people when they need it. Doesn't matter who they are or what they look like. We're all just trying to get through this life together." Grandma Rosa had always been like that. She'd feed anyone who showed up at her door, help neighbors with their groceries, and never ask for anything in return. "What goes around comes around," she used to say with that warm smile that could light up any room. Lisa pulled over about 50 feet ahead of the stranded car and put on her hazard lights. She grabbed the small umbrella from her back seat, the one with the broken spoke that barely kept the rain off, and stepped out into the storm. The man looked up as she approached, surprise written all over his face. He was probably in his 60s with gray hair that was now plastered to his head from the rain. His suit looked like it cost more than Lisa's monthly rent, but right now he just looked like any other person who needed help. "Car trouble?" she called out over the sound of the rain hitting the pavement. "Yes, I'm afraid so," he replied, raising his voice to be heard. "Flat tire, and I have absolutely no idea how to change it. I've been standing here for almost an hour." Lisa walked around to look at the problem. Sure enough, the front passenger tire was completely flat. She'd changed her share of tires over the years. Her dad had made sure she knew how to handle basic car repairs before she got her license. "Do you have a spare?" she asked. The man nodded toward the trunk. "I think so. The car came with all that equipment, but I've never actually used any of it." Lisa almost smiled despite the circumstances. Here was someone who probably had people to handle these kinds of problems for him. But right now he was just as stuck as anyone else would be. "Let me take a look," she offered. She found the spare tire and the tools exactly where they should be. Everything looked brand new, like it had never been touched. The car even smelled new inside the trunk, with that leather and expensive cologne scent that seemed to follow wealthy people around. "What's your name?" the man asked as Lisa started setting up the jack. "Lisa," she said, already getting down on her knees next to the tire. The wet pavement soaked through her work pants immediately, but she'd been through worse. "I'm David," he said, "and I really can't thank you enough for stopping. Most people just drove right by." "Can't blame them," Lisa replied, working to loosen the lug nuts. "It's not exactly ideal weather for this kind of thing." "Then why did you stop?" Lisa paused for a moment, thinking about how to answer that. "My grandmother always said we should help each other out when we can. Besides, I know what it's like to feel stuck." And she did know. She knew what it felt like to stand somewhere, hoping someone would care enough to help. When her car had broken down outside Sophie's school last winter, she'd waited in the cold for 2 hours before a teacher finally offered to give them a ride home. She remembered how grateful she'd felt for that simple kindness. The rain kept coming down as Lisa worked, but she was used to being uncomfortable. Working 2 jobs meant she was always tired, always rushing. always dealing with something that wasn't quite right. At least this was a problem she could actually fix. "You really know what you're doing," David observed, holding the umbrella over her as best he could. "My dad taught me," Lisa said, grunting as she worked to get a particularly stubborn lug nut loose. "He said I needed to be able to take care of myself no matter what." Smart man. Yeah, he was. Lisa felt that familiar pang in her chest. Dad had been gone for 3 years now, but she still missed his steady presence and practical wisdom. He would have stopped to help you too. It took about 20 minutes to get the spare tire on and the flat one stored away. By the time Lisa was finished, both she and David were soaked to the bone. Her work uniform was muddy and probably ruined, but the car was ready to go. "How much do I owe you?" David asked, reaching for his wallet. Lisa shook her head. "Nothing. Just glad I could help. Please, let me give you something. You've saved my evening, probably my whole week." "Really, it's okay." Lisa was already heading back toward her car. "Just help someone else out when you get the chance." "Wait," David called after her. "How can I thank you properly?" Lisa turned back and smiled. The first real smile she'd managed all day. "There's a diner called Rosie's on Main Street downtown. If you're ever in the neighborhood, stop by for coffee. I work there most evenings." She handed him one of the business cards Mike made her carry, the ones with the diner's faded logo and her name written in below the phone number. "I'll remember that," David said, looking down at the card. Lisa got back in her car and drove away, thinking about how strange life could be sometimes. Here she was, barely making ends meet, helping someone who could probably buy her entire apartment building without blinking. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that someone needed help, and she was able to give it. As she pulled into her driveway 20 minutes later, Lisa realized she felt better than she had all day. 3 weeks had passed since that rainy night on the highway, and Lisa had almost forgotten about David and his fancy car. She had bigger things to worry about now, much bigger things. The letter had arrived on a Friday morning, delivered by certified mail with the kind of official envelope that always meant bad news. Lisa had stared at it for a full 5 minutes before opening it, knowing that whatever was inside would change everything. Pine Valley Care Center was closing down. After 22 years of operation, the nursing home where Lisa worked as a certified nursing assistant was shutting its doors at the end of the month. Budget cuts, insurance changes, and declining state funding had finally caught up with them. The letter used fancy words like restructuring and operational challenges, but what it really meant was simple. Lisa was losing her main job. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, reading the letter for the 4th time while Sophie ate her cereal before school. The numbers kept swimming in her head. Pine Valley paid her $18 an hour for 35 hours a week. That was $630 a week minus taxes. The diner only paid her $12 an hour plus tips, and she could only work there part-time because of her nursing home schedule. "Mom, you okay?" Sophie looked up from her bowl, her dark eyes full of concern that no 8-year-old should have to feel. "Yeah, baby, just some work stuff." Lisa managed to smile. "Nothing for you to worry about." But worry was all Lisa could do these days. Rent was due in 2 weeks. $850 for their small 2-bedroom apartment. Sophie needed new shoes because she'd outgrown her old ones, and her school was asking for money for the field trip to the Science Museum. Normal things that normal families handled without breaking a sweat. But for Lisa, each expense felt like a mountain she had to climb. The worst part wasn't even the money, though that was scary enough. The worst part was leaving her residence at Pine Valley. Mrs. Rodriguez, who always asked Lisa to braid her hair just like her daughter used to do. Mr. Thompson, who told the same stories about his time in Korea but lit up every time someone listened. Betty Williams, who had no family left but always saved half her cookies to share with the staff. These weren't just patients to Lisa. They were people who depended on her, who trusted her, who made her job feel like more than just a paycheck, and now she was abandoning them, even though it wasn't her choice. "I'll figure something out," Lisa whispered to herself as Sophie grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. "Love you." "Mom," Sophie called back, her voice bright and trusting in the way that only children can manage. "Love you too, sweetheart." The next few days blurred together in a haze of job applications and phone calls. Lisa applied everywhere she could think of. Other nursing homes, hospitals, even retail stores. But Pine Valley wasn't the only care facility struggling. Most places were cutting staff, not hiring. The few positions available wanted people with more experience or different certifications than Lisa had. She picked up every extra shift she could get at the diner. Mike, the owner, was understanding about her situation and let her work longer hours, but there were only so many shifts available. The diner was a small place that served mostly coffee, breakfast food, and simple dinners to local workers and truck drivers passing through. It wasn't the kind of place that could support someone trying to pay rent and raise a child on their own. Lisa's days became an exhausting cycle of work, applications, and worry. She'd leave Sophie with their neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, in the mornings, work at Pine Valley until the place officially closed, then rush to the diner for the evening shift. She'd get home around 11 at night, help Sophie with any homework she'd missed, and then stay up until 2 in the morning filling out online job applications. The stress was wearing on both of them. Sophie started having nightmares and asking questions about whether they'd have to move again. Lisa's back ached constantly from being on her feet so much, and she'd started getting headaches that wouldn't go away no matter how much coffee she drank. 2 weeks into this new routine, Lisa was wiping down tables at the diner during a slow Tuesday evening when she noticed a familiar face near the back corner booth. For a second, she couldn't place where she'd seen him before. The man was well dressed in a dark suit, reading something on his phone while a cup of coffee sat cooling in front of him. Then it hit her. David, the man from the highway, with the flat tire. He looked different in the warm light of the diner, cleaner, more polished, like he belonged in a much fancier place than Rosie's. He was sitting alone, but kept glancing around the restaurant like he was studying everything, the way people sat, how the staff moved between tables, even the faded decorations on the walls. Lisa felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. She looked down at her uniform, a simple white shirt and black pants that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she probably smelled like French fries and coffee. Not exactly how she wanted to be seen by someone who drove a car that cost more than her yearly salary. But a customer was a customer, and she needed every tip she could get these days. "Hi there," she said, approaching his table with what she hoped was a confident smile. "Can I get you anything else?" David looked up from his phone and his face broke into a genuine smile. "Lisa, I was hoping you'd be working tonight." You remembered. She felt surprised and pleased at the same time. "How's the car running?" "Perfect, thanks to you. I still can't believe how lucky I was that you stopped to help." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Do you have a minute to sit?" "I know you're working, but—" Lisa glanced around the nearly empty diner. Mike was in the back doing inventory, and her only other customers were 2 truck drivers who were absorbed in their conversation about delivery routes. "Just for a minute," she said, sliding into the booth. "How have you been?" David asked, and something in his tone suggested he actually wanted to know. The question caught Lisa off guard. When was the last time someone had asked how she was and seemed to genuinely care about the answer? Not just the automatic fine that people expected, but the real truth about how things were going. "Honestly," Lisa found herself saying, "it's been a rough few weeks. I lost my main job. The nursing home where I worked is closing down, so I'm trying to figure out what comes next." "I'm sorry to hear that," David said, and his concern seemed real. "That must be incredibly stressful." "It is," Lisa admitted. "But something will work out. It always does eventually." She wasn't sure she believed that anymore, but it was the kind of thing you had to say. The kind of hope you had to hold on to even when everything felt like it was falling apart. David nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been coming here for about a week now, just observing. Watching how this place operates, how the staff interacts with customers. It's fascinating." "Observing?" Lisa felt confused. "Are you thinking about buying a restaurant or something?" David smiled mysteriously. "Something like that. Tell me, what do you think makes a restaurant successful, from your perspective working here?" It was an odd question, but Lisa found herself thinking about it seriously. "Honestly, it's about making people feel welcome, like they matter. Mrs. Rodriguez comes in every Wednesday for the same coffee and piece of pie, and Mike always remembers exactly how she likes it. Tommy, one of our regulars, lost his job last month, and we've been letting him sit here with just 1 cup of coffee for hours because we know he doesn't have anywhere else to go. It's not just about the food, it's about treating people like human beings." David was listening intently, like her answer actually mattered to him. "That's exactly what I thought you'd say," he said quietly. The conversation with David had been nice, but it didn't pay the bills. Lisa walked home that night thinking about his strange questions about what made restaurants successful. He'd seemed genuinely interested in her answers, which was refreshing. Most customers barely looked at her when she took their orders, but nice conversations didn't change the fact that her world was falling apart piece by piece. The next morning brought another blow. Lisa opened her mailbox to find a notice from Sophie's school. The after-school program that watched her daughter until Lisa got off work was raising their fees by $40 a month. It didn't sound like much, but when you were already choosing between groceries and gas money, $40 might as well have been $400. Mom, can I still go to Jenny's birthday party on Saturday? Sophie asked over breakfast, holding up a colorful invitation. Her mom said they're going to that new arcade place. Lisa's heart sank. Birthday parties meant presents, and presents meant money they didn't have. But looking at Sophie's hopeful face, she couldn't bring herself to say no outright. We'll see, honey. Let me check my work schedule. Sophie's smile dimmed a little, but she nodded. At 8 years old, she was already learning to read between the lines when her mom said, "We'll see." That afternoon, Lisa swallowed her pride and called her sister Janet in Phoenix. They hadn't talked in months, not since their awkward conversation about Lisa's divorce. But desperate times called for desperate measures. "Lisa, is everything okay?" Janet's voice was cautious. "Yeah, well, not really." Lisa explained about losing her job, about the mounting bills, about feeling like she was drowning in responsibility. "I was wondering if maybe I could borrow a few $100s. Just until I find something steady." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough to make Lisa's stomach clench. "Lisa, you know I'd help if I could, but Rick just got laid off from the construction company, and we're barely making our own mortgage payments. I'm really sorry." No, I understand," Lisa said quickly. "I shouldn't have asked. Maybe you should think about moving back home to Phoenix. Mom and Dad would help you get back on your feet. Move back home. Go back to being the daughter who couldn't make it on her own. Let Sophie start over at yet another school. Leave behind the few friends she'd managed to make here." The idea made Lisa feel sick. "I'll figure something out," she said. "Thanks anyway." That evening at the diner, Lisa threw herself into work with desperate energy. She smiled brighter at customers, refilled coffee cups before they were empty, and hoped that her extra effort might translate into better tips. Every dollar mattered now. It was during the dinner rush that she noticed David had returned. He was sitting at the same corner booth, but this time he wasn't alone. A younger woman in a business suit sat across from him, and they had papers spread out on the table between them. They were talking quietly, pointing at what looked like charts or diagrams. Lisa tried not to stare as she worked, but something about the scene intrigued her. The woman kept gesturing around the restaurant while David nodded thoughtfully. At one point, she saw him point toward the kitchen, then toward the front counter where Mike was running the cash register. "Excuse me, miss," one of her customers called out. "Could we get some more napkins over here?" "Of course, sorry about that." Lisa hurried to help the family at table 6, forcing herself to focus on her job, instead of wondering what David and his companion were discussing. But her curiosity got the better of her when she saw David wave her over to their table during a brief lull in the dinner crowd. "Lisa, I'd like you to meet Catherine," he said as she approached. "Catherine, this is the woman I was telling you about." The woman looked up with sharp, intelligent eyes and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Lisa. David's told me quite a bit about you." "Oh," Lisa said, shaking her hand uncertainly. "Nice to meet you too." "Catherine handles business development for my company," David explained. "We were just discussing some ideas for restaurant concepts." "That sounds interesting," Lisa said politely, though she wasn't sure why they'd wanted to meet her. "David mentioned you had some insights about customer service and what makes people feel welcome in a restaurant," Catherine said. "Would you mind if I asked you a few questions? Just your perspective as someone who works in the industry?" Lisa glanced around the restaurant. It was getting busier, and she could see Mike shooting her questioning looks from behind the counter. "I should probably get back to work," she said, "but maybe some other time?" "Of course," David said. "Actually, would you be interested in talking more about this? Maybe over coffee sometime when you're not working? I'd be happy to pay you for your time as a consultant." "Pay her? For talking about restaurants?" Lisa felt a flicker of hope mixed with confusion. "I guess that could work," she said carefully. "But I work here most evenings and I have my daughter during the day. What about Sunday afternoon? Catherine suggested. Say 2 o'clock at that coffee shop on Elm Street? The Blue Moon Cafe? Lisa knew it well. It was one of the nicer places in town, the kind of spot where coffee cost $4 instead of $1.50. Perfect, David said. And Lisa, this conversation we had the other night about what makes a restaurant work, you really got me thinking. Lisa nodded, still not entirely sure what she was agreeing to, but the possibility of earning some extra money was too tempting to pass up. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of orders and small talk with customers. But Lisa found herself thinking about David's offer. What kind of consulting could she possibly do? She was a waitress and a nursing assistant, not a business expert, but he'd seemed genuinely interested in her opinions. And Catherine had taken notes during their brief conversation. Maybe, just maybe, something good was finally going to happen. When her shift ended at 11, Lisa counted her tips with more hope than she'd felt in weeks. $43.50. Not enough to solve her problems, but enough to buy Sophie a small birthday present for her friend's party. As she walked to her car, she noticed David and Catherine getting into a sleek black sedan in the parking lot. Through the window, she could see them still talking, still looking at papers. Whatever they were planning, it was clearly important to them. Lisa drove home wondering what Sunday would bring. She'd learned not to get her hopes up too high. Life had taught her that lesson the hard way. But for the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things might start looking up. She had no idea how right she was, or how much her life was about to change. Back at the diner, Mike was locking up for the night when he noticed the black sedan still sitting in the parking lot. He'd seen the well-dressed man and woman talking with Lisa, and something about the whole situation felt unusual. But then again, Lisa was a good person who helped everyone she met. Maybe someone was finally ready to help her for a change. He turned off the lights and headed home, not knowing that he'd just witnessed the beginning of something that would change not just Lisa's life, but the lives of everyone in their small town. Sunday afternoon couldn't come fast enough. Lisa had spent the weekend trying not to think too much about her meeting with David, but her mind kept wandering back to his mysterious questions about restaurants and business. She'd even Googled restaurant consulting on her old laptop, trying to understand what he might want from her. Sophie was spending the afternoon with Mrs. Patterson, their neighbor, who had offered to watch her for free after hearing about Lisa's job troubles. "You go to your meeting," the elderly woman had said with a knowing smile. "Something tells me this might be important." Lisa arrived at the Blue Moon Cafe 15 minutes early, her palms slightly sweaty despite the cool October air. She'd chosen her best outfit, a navy blue dress she'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago, and a cardigan that Sophie always said made her look fancy. Still, walking into the upscale coffee shop made her feel underdressed compared to the other customers with their expensive handbags and designer shoes. She ordered a regular coffee and found a quiet table near the window, checking her phone nervously every few minutes. What if this was some kind of joke? What if David didn't show up? What if he was one of those people who got a kick out of making working people feel foolish? At exactly 2 o'clock, David walked through the door, followed by Catherine and another man Lisa didn't recognize. The new person was younger, maybe in his 30s, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the kind of confident expression that came with success. "Lisa, thanks for coming," David said, shaking her hand warmly. "I'd like you to meet James, our director of operations." James smiled and sat down across from her. "David's told us a lot about you, both about your help with his car and your insights about customer service." "I'm still not sure what kind of insights I could have," Lisa said honestly. "I mean, I just serve food and try to be nice to people." "That's exactly why we want to talk to you," Catherine said, pulling out a folder from her bag. "But first, I think David has something he needs to explain." David looked slightly uncomfortable for the first time since Lisa had known him. He cleared his throat and looked directly at her. "Lisa, I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am," he began. "My full name is David Thornton, and I'm the CEO of Thornton Hospitality Group." The name meant nothing to Lisa, but she could tell from his tone that it was supposed to be impressive. "We own and operate 47 restaurants across 3 states, James added. "Everything from casual dining to upscale establishments." Lisa felt her coffee cup freeze halfway to her lips. "You own restaurants?" 47 of them, David confirmed. with plans to expand to 75 locations within the next 2 years. The number hit Lisa like a physical blow. 47 restaurants. That meant hundreds of employees, millions of dollars, a level of success she couldn't even imagine, and she'd changed this man's tire in the rain like he was just anybody. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "If you own all these restaurants, why were you asking me about customer service?" "You must know more about that than I ever will." David smiled. "That's where you're wrong. I know about profit margins and supply chains and marketing budgets, but you know about something much more valuable. You know about making people feel cared for. You know what it's like to work hard for every dollar and still treat everyone with dignity. The night you helped me with my tire," David continued, "I was actually driving back from looking at a potential location for our newest restaurant. We'd been scouting properties in this area for months, but I couldn't get a feel for the community. Then my tire went flat and I got to see exactly what kind of people live here." Catherine opened her folder and spread several photographs across the table. They were pictures of restaurant interiors, modern, sleek spaces with polished floors and artistic lighting. "This is what our new flagship location is going to look like," she explained. "We're calling it Hometown Kitchen. The concept is upscale comfort food with a focus on genuine hospitality." "It looks beautiful," Lisa said, though she couldn't help wondering why they were showing her this. "The location we've chosen is about 10 minutes from here," James said. "We break ground next month and we're planning to open in 6 months." "That's great," Lisa said, still confused about her role in all this. "I'm sure it'll be very successful." David leaned forward. "Lisa, we want you to manage it." The words hung in the air like something Lisa couldn't quite grasp. "Manage it?" "Be the general manager," Catherine clarified. "Oversee daily operations, hire and train staff. Ensure that every customer has the kind of experience that made you stop to help a stranger on a rainy night." Lisa felt like the world had suddenly tilted sideways. "I think there's been some mistake. I'm a waitress. I don't know anything about managing a restaurant, especially not one like this." "You know the most important thing," David said firmly. "You know how to care about people. Everything else can be taught." James pulled out another folder. "We're prepared to offer you a starting salary of $65,000 a year, plus performance bonuses that could bring your total compensation to over $80,000. The numbers swirled in Lisa's head. $65,000. She currently made about $28,000 between both her jobs. This would more than double her income. Plus full health and dental benefits for you and Sophie, Catherine added. 4 weeks paid vacation and profit sharing after your first year. "How do you know about Sophie?" Lisa asked, sudden worry creeping into her voice. "You mentioned her the other night at the diner," David said gently. "You said something about checking your work schedule before committing to plans. It was clear you're a single mom trying to balance everything." "We've also set up a college fund," James said casually, as if he was discussing the weather. $20,000 to start with annual contributions until Sophie graduates high school." Lisa felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She blinked them back, trying to process what she was hearing. "I don't understand why you're doing this." "Because 3 weeks ago you saw someone who needed help and you stopped," David said simply. "You didn't know who I was or what I could do for you. You just saw another human being in trouble and decided to act. That's the kind of person we want leading our team." "But what if I'm terrible?" "At it?" Lisa asked. "What if I make mistakes or don't know what I'm doing?" "Then you'll learn," Catherine said with a smile. "We didn't get where we are by avoiding risks. We got here by recognizing good people when we meet them." David pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "This has my direct phone number. Take some time to think about it. Talk to Sophie. But Lisa, I want you to know that this isn't charity. This is business. We believe you'll make Hometown Kitchen the kind of place that changes how people think about dining out." Lisa stared at the card, her hands trembling slightly. Everything she'd worried about for the past month, the bills, the rent, Sophie's future, all of it could be solved with one word. Yes, but it felt too good to be true. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Of course. That night on the highway, did you know this might happen? Did you plan any of this?" David laughed. "Lisa, I was standing in the rain with a flat tire and no idea how to fix it. Trust me, this wasn't part of any plan. Sometimes the best things in life happen when we're not planning at all." He stood up and extended his hand. Think about it, but don't think too long. We start construction interviews next week, and I'd rather be interviewing your assistant managers than looking for someone else to fill your position." As Lisa watched them leave, she realized her life had just changed forever. She just had to find the courage to say yes. Lisa sat in her car outside the Blue Moon Cafe for 20 minutes after David and his team left, staring at the business card in her hands. The numbers kept running through her head like a song she couldn't stop humming. $65,000, college fund for Sophie, health insurance. It felt like winning the lottery, except she hadn't even bought a ticket. When she finally got home, Sophie was at the kitchen table working on a puzzle with Mrs. Patterson. "How was your meeting, dear?" the older woman asked with twinkling eyes. "It was unexpected," Lisa managed to say. After Mrs. Patterson left, Lisa sat down next to her daughter. "Sophie, how would you feel if Mommy got a different job? A better job?" Sophie looked up from her puzzle pieces. "Would you still have to work 2 places?" "No, sweetheart. Just 1 place. And I'd be home more often." "Would we have to move?" "No, we could stay right here." Sophie considered this seriously. "Would you be happier?" The question caught Lisa off guard. She'd been so focused on the practical aspects, the money, the security, the benefits, and that she hadn't thought about happiness. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think I would be." "Then you should do it," Sophie said, returning to her puzzle as if the decision was that simple. Maybe it was. Lisa called David's number that evening, her hands shaking as she dialed. "David Thornton. Hi, this is Lisa, from the cafe today." "Lisa, I was hoping you'd call. What did you decide?" She took a deep breath. "Yes, I want to do it. I want the job." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Outstanding. Can you meet us at the construction site tomorrow morning? Say 10 o'clock. The next 6 months passed like a whirlwind. Lisa had never worked so hard or learned so much in her life. David paired her with Catherine, who became her mentor and guide through the complex world of restaurant management. They covered everything from inventory systems to staff scheduling, from food costs to customer complaint procedures. The hardest part wasn't learning the technical skills, it was learning to see herself as someone who belonged in this world. For weeks, Lisa felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. When vendors called her ma'am and asked for her approval on orders, when contractors deferred to her opinions about kitchen layout, when David introduced her to other restaurant owners as our new GM, she kept waiting for someone to realize they'd made a mistake. But slowly, something began to shift. Lisa discovered she had instincts about people that served her well in hiring. She could tell within 5 minutes of an interview whether someone would treat customers with genuine care or just go through the motions. She had ideas about menu layout and staff training that impressed even James, the operations director. Most importantly, she never forgot what it felt like to worry about making ends meet. When Hometown Kitchen finally opened its doors on a bright Tuesday morning in May, Lisa stood in the dining room at 6 a.m., watching her team make final preparations. 23 employees, all of them people she'd hired personally. The servers she'd chosen weren't necessarily the most experienced, but they were the ones who genuinely cared about making people feel welcome. The kitchen staff included 2 single mothers and a recent college graduate paying off student loans. People who understood what a good job could mean. "Ready for this?" David appeared beside her, looking around the gleaming restaurant with obvious pride. "As ready as I'll ever be," Lisa replied, straightening her manager's badge for the 10th time. The first customer was Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly woman from Lisa's old nursing home job. She'd driven 30 minutes just to support Lisa on opening day. "Mija," she said, tears in her eyes, "look at you now. I always knew you were destined for something special." By noon, there was a line out the door. Word had spread quickly through the community about the new restaurant and its local manager, who'd worked her way up from waiting tables. People came as much to support Lisa as to try the food. But what really made Lisa's heart sing was watching her teamwork. Jerry, one of the servers she'd hired, went out of his way to help an elderly man read the menu when he'd forgotten his glasses. Maya, the hostess, remembered the names of customers who'd only been in once before. The kitchen staff sent out a free dessert to a family celebrating their daughter's first job. It was exactly what Lisa had envisioned, a place where people felt cared for, not just fed. 3 months after opening, Hometown Kitchen was exceeding every projection David's company had made. But more than that, it was becoming the heart of the community. Local business meetings happened over breakfast. High school kids came to study over coffee and stayed for dinner. Families made it their regular Sunday spot. One evening in August, Lisa was doing her final walkthrough of the restaurant when she noticed a young woman sitting alone in a corner booth, crying quietly into her phone. "I understand, Mom, but I just don't have it right now," the woman was saying. "The car repair took everything I had saved." Lisa recognized the conversation because she'd had so many like it herself. She approached the table carefully. "Excuse me, I'm Lisa, the manager. Is everything okay?" The woman looked up, embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm fine. The food was wonderful. What's your name?" Lisa asked gently. "Amy. I work at the medical office down the street. I come in sometimes for lunch." Lisa remembered her. Always ordered the soup and salad special, always left exact change, always sat alone reading a paperback book. "Amy, can I ask you something?" "Are you looking for extra work?" Amy's eyes widened. "Actually, yes. I'm trying to save up for nursing school, but it's taking longer than I hoped. We need someone to work weekend mornings, breakfast and lunch shift. The pay is good and the tips are even better. Would you be interested?" 6 months later, Amy was enrolled in nursing school, working her way through with help from her restaurant job. She wasn't the only one. Lisa had created opportunities for a dozen people in the community, always remembering what it felt like to struggle and worry about the future. David visited regularly, always amazed at what Lisa had built. "You know," he told her one day, "we're planning to open 5 more locations next year. We're going to need regional managers to oversee them. Are you offering me a promotion?" Lisa asked with a smile. "I'm offering you a future. But more than that, I'm learning from you. Every restaurant in our chain is now implementing your training program. You're changing how we do business." That evening, Lisa drove home to the house she and Sophie had moved into, a 3-bedroom place with a yard and a swing set. Sophie was thriving in her new school, making friends and talking about college like it was a given, not a dream. As she pulled into her driveway, Lisa thought about that rainy night 8 months ago when she'd stopped to help a stranger. She'd had no idea that 20 minutes of getting soaked and dirty would change her entire life. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the best things happen not when you were trying to get something for yourself, but when you were simply trying to help someone else. Her phone rang. It was Catherine. "Lisa, there's been an accident on Highway 45. Some woman stopped to help and now her car won't start. David's sending a tow truck, but she needs a ride home. Can you go get her?" Lisa smiled, already reaching for her car keys. "Of course, what's her name?" "Jennifer. She's a teacher at the elementary school. Single mom with 2 kids. I'll be right there." Some circles, Lisa thought as she backed out of her driveway, were meant to keep going.